guys, I'm here with Gary Winter, who is the managing attorney with Lawvex, and I'm really excited for this little video series we're going to do. I was really doing it for my own self-edification. I wanted free legal advice, and so this is how you do it. You build a YouTube audience, and you make friends with your attorney, and then you just, hey, I just want to interview. No, but I put this on YouTube, on Facebook. I said, I'm going to be interviewing my attorney, and I'm going to ask a couple questions about like getting your business started legally. Now, I've been working with Gary for a few years. Now, Lawvex is they specialize in estates and trusts, but they also work with a lot of businesses. And Gary, why don't you give us like the elevator pitch about Lawvex?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. So Lawvex is formed really out of the desire to create a less frustrating legal experience for everybody, both clients and attorneys. So we have a completely different modern business model for our attorney partners. And for our clients, we're trying to really give 5-star service, which service in the legal industry is kind of unheard of. Nobody's talking about it, nobody's having that conversation, and we're actually trying to do something about it. So the way that we deliver on that is with our core values. We're trying to be faster, more efficient, transparency in how we work and in our files and our billing, and also with just providing great value and educating our clients along the way. So doing a video series like this is right up my alley. We love it, and it's part of who we are.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. I have this list of questions. Some of these I came up with, and others are from the internet people. And again, some of these might sound elementary, so don't laugh. But like, what does it mean to start a business legally? Like when I think of starting a business legally, I mean legitimately. And a lot of our audience is they've been working maybe freelance, and they're thinking about starting an LLC, or they don't know what the difference between a sole prop or a DBA, and what do we have to do to get set up legally? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. The way we have phrased that question in our conversations with our clients is, when is it appropriate to take the leap to formalize the business? And I would say, what people are asking you, the internet people, what they're asking is, when do I want to take those steps to formalize my business? And usually that conversation revolves around a couple of topics. One is the risk that you're taking in your business or your freelance activity. And the other one is employees. And employees is actually a subset of risk, because they're probably more likely to sue you than your customers, believe it or not. So it has to do with that. Formality is when you're legally creating that business. Before you start creating a business entity that's separate from yourself, whether that's an LLC or a corporation or whatever, it's really just you. You're a sole proprietor, and it's all done under your tax ID number. And so if there's a problem with the business is you, and you don't have any of those benefits of legal separation. So
does like the size, and by size I mean revenue, does that have to play in it? Like once maybe I'm making a couple thousand a month in my business, but now I'm making maybe 6 figures in my business. Does that go into play, or does that not really matter?
No, it does. I would say that's another factor. And for people who are self-employed, they can get some tax benefits of incorporating, forming an entity, paying themselves a salary, and then paying themselves shareholder distributions or partner distributions in another way. So there are some reasons to do that. But you probably need to be upwards of that number. I mean, I don't think that makes sense, really until somebody hits around 120,000 as a general rule. Because until you incorporate and form a separate entity, you're 1099, self-employment tax, which is the worst possible kind of income there is. It's the highest tax, really. And when you form a corporation or an LLC, something separate, you can start to carve those things up. And that's a long, probably 45-minute conversation to go through how that works. But there can be some tax benefits for doing that.
Right. So I think that. So what are some of the benefits then of starting? So you talked about risk, right? Mm-hmm. So you're shielding your personal self from risk, which, like, if you have an employee and worst case scenario they sue you, they're not suing you personally, they're suing the entity.
Yeah.
And another one is tax covering, or how would you say that?
Yeah, financial. I mean, take a step back for a second, and you said, well, when should I formalize my business or make it a legal business or whatever? And the answer is it kind of depends. It depends on the risk that you're doing in your activity and how big it is. Are you scaling? Do you have investors? There's lots of questions that we would ask, but I mean, we could boil it down and make it really simple. If I'm doing a high risk activity, even though I'm not doing a whole lot of revenue, I probably would want to consider formalizing the business into a separate entity from myself. Now that
high risk, meaning like, what's an example of that?
Well, it's kind of like we were chatting a little bit before we turned on the camera. I mean, you've got the video producer who's out freelancing or whatever. I mean, is it the likelihood that he's going to have a personal injury or property damage is pretty low. But if I'm a freelancer and I'm giving firearms instruction, that's a whole lot more risky of an activity. If you look at just actuarial tables, right? And so if I'm an individual and I'm out there doing those freelance activities, the photographer that's doing $24,000 a year, not so risky. He doesn't have any staff. He's not making that much money. He's not doing a high risk activity. But the freelance guy that's out there doing firearms instruction, you might want to think about it, because if somebody is injured and somebody gets shot and somebody gets killed, and there's certainly more likelihood of that in firearms instruction than there is in just video production or whatever, then that would come back on me personally. And so my personal assets will be exposed to the plaintiff's claim for damages and so forth. So, what's the remedy for that? Well, I could carry like an umbrella liability policy. So really I would say that's step one for the freelancers is, carry an umbrella liability policy. That's much less expensive and much less hassle than forming an entity. And that's what we usually tell people when we meet with folks and they're like, hey, I just did this, I'm a consultant or whatever, I don't have any clients, do I need to form an LLC? Well, probably not really yet. Because you're not in a high risk activity and you can carry insurance to kind of cover you. Next level up from that, okay, well, I'm doing a little bit more of a high risk activity. I have some personal assets I want to protect. That's another factor, right? If I don't have any personal assets I'm protecting, then okay, it doesn't matter. But if I do have some personal assets I'm trying to protect, then it might be worthwhile to consider that next jump up, which would be like forming a limited liability company, which is an LLC or a corporation, depending. And the idea there, and this is kind of the short version of my business speech, is the concept with a business entity is to create another guy in the room. Like we got right now, there's Sean and Gary sitting in the room, but the concept is how do I get somebody over there who's actually the one who's conducting that business activity? So like we have, Butler Development LLC, I think, or something like that. When we file the paperwork and we do the legal push, the paper push to create that other guy, and then you put your assets, you funded your sole proprietor business into that other guy's lap over there. So we create that other person in the room for legal purposes. It's him that's doing the employment. It's him that's doing the activity, the business activity. It's him that's taking the risk. And so the concept with any corporation or limited liability company is my exposure, my personal exposure is limited to the extent of my investment in that guy. So I took $10,000 and I gave it to him in exchange for 10,000 shares of stock. Mm-hmm. I'm an equity owner, I own the stock. He's got the cash. He screws up, he gets sued. My 10,000's at risk.
Right.
My own personal assets, my investments, everything that says Gary is not at risk for what he does, as long as I keep up the distinction and the formality and the difference between him and me. And that's where the formality comes in. I got to have the paperwork, I got to file it right, I got to maintain it every year. And that's why, we kind of get frustrated with people when they're like, oh yeah, I formed my entity online or whatever, but actually they didn't. They just did one thing and everything else was left undone. And so why would the law allow them the benefit of keeping their assets separate from the business if they haven't kept up the formalities to show that as well? So if you do that and you do take that next level, what you're doing is creating another person, another legal person to take the risk, and you're only exposed to the extent of your investment in that guy.
Right.
But you got to, once you create that baby, you got to take care of it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of stuff you got to do. You've got annual filings, and you've got some paperwork to be able to show, so that if he gets sued, you could show the court system, show the government, and go, yeah, he truly is separate. He has his own bank account, he has his own tax ID number, and he does what he does, and I do what I do. And really, we don't, interchange. Money doesn't flow back and forth for no reason. It's either, a loan, a distribution, or payroll, and you have to have some of those systems set up. So kind of a long way of explaining, like when does a freelancer want to take that step and formalize and create that other legal entity? It's usually to protect their own personal assets from liability for the business activity, or we're going to hire employees, and I want them to work for the business entity, not necessarily for me personally. And we're getting big enough where it makes sense to really identify differences between the business finances and my personal finances. Because as long as I'm a freelance sole proprietor, I'm throwing everything on Schedule E, and you can't really tell the difference between the metrics of the business versus the personal metrics. Do you know what I mean? You've got too many, there's dog food and cat food in Schedule, like, well, okay, is that really a business expense? And so I remember I thought of this as I was looking over your questions earlier today. And the first thing when starting up a company, if you're really gonna make that jump from a 1099 freelance person to business owner, entrepreneur, is you gotta get your mind right. It's a completely different mindset. There's employee mindset, right, where I just go to work and do my job. And then there's self-employed mindset, where I go to work and do my job, but I get to choose my jobs, right? And then there's business owner, entrepreneur, where, okay, I'm creating something where other people go to work and do stuff, and I'm the curator, I'm the caretaker, I'm the organizer, I'm the visionary. If you want to be that last thing, that's probably the time to formalize.
I've never thought of it like that. I always thought, self-employed entrepreneur is kind of the same thing, but I like the delineation between employee, self-employed, which is like you are employing yourself, and then business owner, to where you're actually now creating a space where other people can be employed. And that's really the jump, is are you ready to go from self-employed to employer or business owner? Right.
And there's a huge leap. Not everybody who can be self-employed can be that business owner. I mean, there's a business mindset, there's a leadership mindset. I mean, you're running a team of people, I'm running a team of people all the time. It's not everybody's cut out for that. And so the first thing I would think about, before making that jump is, okay, is that my vision? Is my vision to grow an enterprise, a business that works even when I'm at home asleep? Is that my vision? And then, am I prepared for that?
And I think there's a lot of happy people that are doing really well as self-employed, and they're running in their lane and making plenty of money. And
I like these streamers. I mean, I follow some guys that are YouTube streamers, particularly in certain video games that I actually really like. And those guys are killing it. I mean, they love what they do. They love the game that they're playing or whatever, and they're very, very good at it. They have a massive following, and they're perfectly happy.
And they're not going to build an enterprise where they're hiring employees or anything like that.
No, they don't need that. Yeah. And that's cool. I mean, that's okay. Believe me, it comes at a price. I mean, if you have to, I think, want that. You want to be a team leader. You want to be an organizer. You want to be a problem solver if you want that business and that entrepreneurial venture. You need to have a big vision. You need to want to serve people, save people, help, whatever, fix the product or whatever. You got to have a big vision if you want to go to that next level. If you're just self-employed, there's some pretty easy ways to legally take care of business, and you not necessarily have to form a separate entity.
So I think that's a good takeaway, is that just because you're self-employed and you're operating as a sole proprietor, you are the business, doesn't necessarily mean you have to take that next step to start an LLC or corporation to be legitimate. There's a lot of legitimate self-employed people